Hello and welcome. I'm Megan. I'm a photographer and watercolor artist with chronic health challenges, POTS, and wrist strength issues. So let's talk about watercolor brushes for wrist strength issues. There's something about a flat brush that is much easier on my wrist strength issues than even a larger round or a quill. I have found a quill to be easier than a round. Anything that's flat with a good chunky handle will be good to start on. You'll keep your brush far longer than the paint, so it's the thing to invest in. Avoid small brushes with tiny handles that do tiny detail work if you have wrist strength issues like me. And you need to wear a wrist brace when you're first learning and anytime you take a class. Oh, I am not a doctor. This is just my personal experience. I discovered that I can watercolor 3 years ago now, or has it been 4 years? Wow, it's been 4 years. When my mom handed me a giant flat brush and her new watercolor paints and said, just put some paint on paper. And I discovered that I can do this even with wrist strength issues. Before that, I tried to do pens and pencils and things, and I would, sign my name or something or write a paragraph in a journal, and my wrist would ache for days. I didn't know I could art on paper at all. And then we discovered watercolor. And as soon as we discovered I could do this, we went down the rabbit hole of learning everything. And today we're going to talk about brushes. There is something about using a flat brush that is just so much easier on my wrist than even a larger round or a quill. In order, I would say flat's the easiest, and then a quill, and then round. I don't really use rounds. Anything that's flat with a good chunky handle is really good to start on. Tiny repetitive movements are not very good, and small handles on brushes are not very good. Watercolor is really cool if you have wrist strength issues because you can put the water on the page with one broad stroke or 3. And then you can drop in some more color with about the same number of strokes and actually make something. Like your whole sky can be painted in 6 brush strokes or 2 brush strokes. You can just watch the paint do fun things. You don't even have to make it look like anything. Swatching over and over is really fun. It's very therapeutic when you have chronic health challenges, or if you're curled up in bed from chronic health challenges and you feel really bad from a migraine and you're overly tired and you're exhausted and you need to just do something, but you have a migraine so you can't really do anything. You can sit in bed and it can be almost totally dark in your room and you can paint. Put paint on paper. I did a blog post about that. I'll try to remember to link it for you. But there's only 10 blog posts on my channel, so you'll find it just fine. My channel. My blog. I learned to paint watercolor on a 3/4 flat golden Taklon brush. And then a 1/2 inch flat from Princeton Select. After I painted with that for a few weeks, I got a travel flat brush from Davinci Caseneo. I painted with that brush almost exclusively for a month and a half or so. The awesome thing about this brush is the larger handle, because it's a travel brush, so it needs to be able to close up around the brush head. It's a size 10 flat with a large ergonomic handle, and it's great for travel. It's made from synthetic squirrel, so it's really absorbent for a size 10 flat. It's my favorite brush. Full stop, it's my favorite brush. My favorite non-travel brush would have to be the 3/4 Princeton Velvetouch flat wash brush. It's a synthetic Kolinsky blend, so it's between the stiffness of a golden Taklon and a less water holding capacity, and the floppiness of the synthetic squirrel with an enormous water holding capacity. So let's talk about this list. As you can see, the things at the top of the list, larger brushes, things like this one would be somewhere around here. And then slightly smaller would be this one right here. Can you see the whole thing on the screen? Yes. As you go down this list, you get more control because the brush is getting smaller and it's getting harder on your wrist. You'll also notice there are things like 2 different versions of 3/4 inch flat. If you had a synthetic squirrel version of this 3/4 flat, then it would be more absorbent, would hold more water, and so it would be less control you would have. It would be easier on your wrist. It would hold more water. If it holds less water, then you're going to have more control. So that's why they often say start on something like a golden Taklon when you are beginning watercolor, as a beginner, because that's going to be a lot easier for you. It's not going to hold as much water. That's going to be down here, because figuring out water control is hard, and if you have extra water, it's extra hard. But it's easier on your wrist if you have more water. I don't know where my really large quills are, but this one's a really large one. This is beautiful. Really large quill. Let's start lining these up for you. Some examples of the things on this list. So I have a quill that's a really large quill. This is Danube Artist quill from Creative Mark. This one's a 10. A big flat brush. This is a 1-inch flat brush. You can see this is one of Lindsay's brushes. This isn't a synthetic squirrel, which is what I had written here. This is my example chart. I believe this is synthetic Kolinsky. So a little less water holding capacity than a synthetic squirrel would be. A little bit more down the list. A slightly smaller quill. I have, this one came in a set. Oh, just the coolest thing ever. Okay. And this is a size 6 quill. This is really smaller than I should be painting with, but I don't know where the in-between, like I have a slightly bigger one of these, and then this would be the slightly smaller one. But I don't know where I put that. I have another brush roll. I think it's the one that's upstairs next to my bed. And I'm not going up the stairs to show you brushes. That's going to be too physically tiring. Oh, what's this one? Next is a 3/4 flat, which would be my Princeton Velvetouch. I also have a Mimik one, which is a really good brand to start on, which would be the synthetic squirrel. Then this is the synthetic Kolinsky on the list. And then we've got size 14 round. This is a size 12 round. This is an icon from Jackson's. Synthetic Kolinsky. This is a size 12 round Mimik. So this is synthetic squirrel. And this is an interesting thing to note about watercolor brushes. And that is, these are both 12s. So one of the things you have to begin paying attention to if you have wrist strength issues is handle size. I can paint with this one, but not nearly as much as I can paint with this one. This one has a slightly bulbous handle, so this would be much easier for me to hold on to than this one would be. So that's one of the pieces you want to look at. The other is, they're both size 12, but because they're from different brands, the brush head is actually going to be different. So even though they're the same number size, the brush is going to be a different size. So sometimes you will find that you can use a 12 round and an 8 round from one brand, but you need a size 14 round from another brand. And then this one is a 12 that's a Kolinsky, so that would go a little bit below this because it's going to be more snappy, a little less absorbent. This is my synthetic Kolinsky quill. These black ones are from Jackson's Art. They are icon. I got them in like a try me set thing from Jackson's a while ago. I love painting with this one. This is a size 2 quill. That, I will point out, looks the same size as the size 10 quill. This is a size 2 quill, and this is a size 10 quill. This one's the synthetic Kolinsky, and this one's a synthetic squirrel. But they look like exactly the same size, but one's a 10 and one's a 2. So I would put this up here, and then this one would go. And then I have an angle shader instead of a flat, because the flat's probably upstairs in my brush roll. This is what I started on, though, is the Princeton Select line. It's got a good bulbous handle here, the 1/2 inch, and then mainly I used 3/4 brushes, I think, but I also used this one a lot as I was figuring out what worked for my wrist, and discovered that flat brushes worked really well. It's an angle shader, but I can use it to demonstrate. Oh, this definitely should go all the way down here. And then last is the 12 round that's also in the same line from Lindsay here. Hers are a really good set. They're cost effective for such big brushes, and they come with multiple different types. So like this one is a synthetic squirrel, size 12 round, kind of quill like, it's so big. And then, because like look at how this is the size 10, nope, size 12. This is a size 12 round, but this is a size 10 quill. But they look like the same size, so I can paint with this one kind of like it's a quill, because it's so big here. But this would probably go around here, because it's a little bit bigger than this size 12 round. So generally speaking, in Mimik, I would use the 14 round, and then I can use the size 12 of this, even though these both say 12. Look how different they are. So let's do some painting, and I'm going to talk to you more about how to use brushes with restraint issues, because I already recorded that part, and then I realized that hands were not on screen. Now, those are going to be easier on your wrist the less control you have, the ones that were earlier in the list, to a point. The couple largest on this list, the really large quill, 1 inch flat, they're really hard to rinse out, so that makes it a little harder to use them, because then you have to spend more wrist action on actually rinsing out the brush. It's kind of fun to play with the different shapes and the different materials and figure out which thing is going to work for you. And that's something you're going to need to experiment with. There are brush sets that you can get from different brands. I remember trying out the Mimik one. It's synthetic squirrel. When we first got started painting, it's way less expensive than buying the individual brushes and gives you a chance to try out a few different brushes. Or you can just get a 1/2 inch flat that's golden taklon and a 1/2 inch flat that's synthetic squirrel. And you'll probably change preferences for what you want over time. Point of all of this is you want to get something that's not going to hurt your wrist, that's not too small so you can paint, something that is a watercolor brush, and then keep it just for watercolor to protect it. And then paint and experiment and put the paint on the paper, do some swatching, see if you like landscapes, see if you like florals. Try to pay more attention to what your wrist is doing than what your brush is doing, which is hard when you're trying to paint something specific. So you can just put the paint on the paper and see what the paint is doing and focus more on how you're holding your wrist. Make sure you're not holding it too tight. Maybe if you're gripping your brush too tight, you need a larger handle. And if you're doing repetitive little movements with the brush, too much detail work, and it's making your wrist hurt, get a bigger brush. If your brush is too hard to rinse, get a smaller brush. Or get something that is golden taklon instead of synthetic squirrel. If it's not holding enough water and you keep reloading the water, but then you run out of paint, because I picked up the paint, and then, now I'm like dry brushing, so I need more water. Well, now there's no more paint on my brush. Then you might want something that's synthetic squirrel or synthetic Klinsky that's more absorbent than a golden taklon. And you experiment. And you take frequent breaks to make sure that you're not hurting your wrist so that you can continue doing the painting thing over time. Painting is really therapeutic when you have health challenges. And I want you to be able to watercolor. It's just the best thing ever. If you stick with the same brush for a while, like I used the Travel Caseneo from Davinci, then you'll learn it really well. So I have done the whole experimenting with brushes thing. I've also just painted with that brush for a month, and that means that you are learning that brush and what your wrist can do with that brush. There's so much that I can do with that brush that I just can't figure out how to do with other brushes. Every new brush requires me to learn, how does this brush work with my wrist? Sometimes brushes are similar enough that you don't have that much of a problem with it, But sometimes the brushes are just too different. They are made of different materials. The handles are different. The shape of the brush head is different. So I don't know. I just really like sticking with my one brush. But I've also really enjoyed experimenting with different things. So you have options. It just takes patience to figure all of this out. And if you approach it with a mindset of having fun, just putting the pen on the paper, seeing what the paint is doing, and learning something, taking a break, and making sure your wrist isn't going to hurt from what you just did, and then repeating the process, then you'll have fun and keep doing this long term. You'll find ways to do things that are easier on your wrist. Ways of doing things that a teacher won't show you, because they don't have the same challenges you do. So they didn't have to adapt like you. And you'll have to learn the brush inside and out to be able to do whatever you want to with it. My Caseneo is the go-to whenever I am following a tutorial and don't want to use the tiny brush that the teacher is recommending, because I know what I can do with it and can follow along with pretty much anything with this brush because I know it so well, and usually not end up hurting my wrist following a class because I know what not to do because I've experimented endlessly with this specific brush. The teacher will say, now we're just going to do some little grasses here in the front. And I know from experimentation that those little repetitive movements are going to hurt my wrist. So I may skip the grass. Or I may do some of it, depending on what works for my wrist. And if you're more tired today, do less detail work. Use larger brushes and bigger broad strokes the more tired you are, because you're not going to be as careful when you're tired. All of this endless experimentation has translated over into knowing how to do things on a flat that most people do with a round, but I can't do on a round brush. I literally use my flat brush, the little travel flat brush, to do circles. Circles are hard. I think the wrist action necessary to make a circle is really hard. So I don't know. I use my flat brush and I move my whole arm in a circle. It ends up circle shape-ish. If you're frustrated with circles, paint rocks. They don't have to be perfect. It also really helps to work from your shoulder when you are using your brush instead of actually moving your wrist. So you wear a wrist brace, you don't move your wrist, and you work from your shoulder. You move your whole arm. And this really helps. Sometimes it's not the brush, but how you're using it. So the brush in the beginning was the tool that I needed to teach me how to do this. It needed to be a big flat brush. But now I can paint with the slightly smaller brush that's a slightly smaller flat, because I know from experience with the big flat what I can do and what I can't do. And that just takes practice. The best part, you can paint endless squares, lines, whatever you want, patterns, and call it practicing what your brush can do. I would love to know what your favorite brush is and what do you like painting when you just want to put paint on paper. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.